Hi everyone, I'm Casey Frashante. I'm a professional astrologer, and today we're going to be taking a look at Chris Watts' chart. And I'm not a huge follower of true crime, but this is one of those true crime cases that it's really stuck with me throughout the years. And I think it's because I remember when this happened. Like I remember it so vividly. I remember not even when Shanann and the kids' bodies were found, but when she went missing. And I'm in Australia, and the fact that the day she went missing or the day after she went missing I remember it being kind of like all over the news, all over my phone and my news feeds and everything like that. This was like a pretty big deal of a case when it happened before anyone found anything out. And even as soon as it happens, I remember people saying and commenting, and people in my family commenting on the case, and my friends, and whatever, they were all like, yeah, that guy's weird, talking about Chris. Yeah, that guy's weird, he had something to do with it. And so I just wanted to kind of like take a look at his chart, and we'll later take a look at any transits, progressions, and solar arc directions that were active for him during maybe 9 months before to 6 months after he did what he did to his wife and family. And for those of you who don't know who Chris Watts is, God, there's so many. I feel like there's so many documentaries, there's so many resources online for you to kind of uh, understand what happened in this case. But um, for all intents and purposes, Chris Watts was a young father, like maybe in his mid 30s, who was married to a woman named Shanann. They had two kids together, and Shanann was 15 weeks pregnant at the time that he murdered all three of them, four of them. And he pretty much did this because he was having an affair with a woman from work. Oh, well, I don't even know if he's kind of um, if he's admitted to a reason why, but it's kind of easy to conclude yourself that he did this to kind of be with this other woman, or the affair had something to do with the deaths. But yeah, I don't know if he's ever admitted to the affair being the reason why this happened, or if he has never like even commented on it. I don't know. Um, yeah, he was having an affair with this woman, and kind of, when he's married to his wife who's 15 weeks pregnant, it was kind of like he probably didn't see an out for himself other than doing this. And so, just taking a look at his chart, we can kind of determine what type of person he is, um, and then we can kind of understand more why he would do something like this. So let's just get straight into his chart. I always start with the sun because that's our like immediate life purpose. He has a sun in Taurus in the seventh house. So this tells me that this life he was meant to form these kind of lasting and stable relationships with others, but he does have an opposition between the sun and Saturn. So this is going to be more of a challenge for him. With Saturn in Scorpio, this is someone that can have a lot of trouble around um, emotional intimacy. Saturn rules blockages and what we're scared of, and Scorpio is, deep feelings and merging with another person emotionally. And with that in his first house as well, this is going to be someone that is very emotionally guarded, and there's kind of like an unconscious emotional undercurrent to every kind of barrier they have in place regarding their personality formation, because the first house has to do with the personality and even the physical body. Um, Saturn in Scorpio as well can be very sexually manipulative and emotionally manipulative. Um, so, for example, when we have kind of defenses in our personality, everyone wants something, and when we feel like someone's trying to get something from us, Saturn in the first house individuals are more prone to being very suspicious of others. Saturn in Scorpio is going to be totally suspicious of anyone that wants anything to do with them. So he had really strong barriers to entry regarding who he let into his life, and who he let in intimately, with Scorpio being there. And again, Scorpio risings are quite private anyways. So huge barriers to entry for who he let in. But yet he was also meant to be pursuing relationships with other people, um, and steadily and slowly. Taurus is a very slow sign. This isn't Sun in Libra in the seventh, which would be about these kind of superficial relationships that we make with other people. This was these slow, evolving relationships that we're meant to have with people, and this challenged this issue that he had of him not wanting to let people in, and him having a real fear around emotionally connecting with others, and with it being retrograde as well. Um, this tells me, and okay, so Saturn is retrograde and it's opposite the sun. the Sun and Saturn are signifiers of the father in a man's chart. And so when you oftentimes when you see the Sun and Saturn in hard aspect, especially the opposition, because oppositions get worked out in relationships, this has something he got this issue from his father, whatever that means. Saturn retrograde can also represent a father figure that didn't instill the qualities of the sign that Saturn is in the child's chart. So, Saturn in Scorpio, his father, for example, hypothetically, could have been very emotionally withdrawn and shut Chris as a boy out emotionally. His father could have manipulated his emotion. His father could have manipulated young Chris's emotions, and Chris got this trait from his father and proceeded to use that in his life and in his relationships and whatnot. So, daddy issues, yes. Um, and so with Saturn and Scorpio, there's going to be a denial of these deeper feelings, and so he's naturally going to have this kind of this difficulty in doing his solar thing of making these lasting relationships with others. That was difficult for him, and so he kind of, in my opinion, he kind of defaulted to just having these very kind of surface level, uh, superficial relationships with others because that was easier than just letting people in. And you can kind of see this, how this played out in his life. I don't think he really had any friends. I don't think anyone really came forward to his defense. Mm, I don't think even his relationship with his wife, people were kind of, they would say to his wife all the time, or I'm sure they're not saying to her, but saying about her, like, why is she with him? Um, he's weird, he's too quiet. Like, there was no one on Chris's side really, because I don't think he ever really connected with anyone in that way. And then if we look at his moon, he has this moon in Aries in the sixth house. Moon in the sixth house. Moon in the sixth house is going to be very emotionally attached to his routine. Um, and Aries has a lot to do with independence. I was going to say freedom, but it's more about independence. But he does have it trine his Uranus, and Uranus is the planet of freedom. So he's someone that needs to have freedom and independence in his everyday life because the sixth house has to do with the day-to-day living. Um, Work in general as well, the work that he does every day, he needs the freedom to work alone and not have someone breathing down his neck. Um, and he was, yeah, like I said, very emotionally attached to his routine, passionately attached, because we're talking about Aries, that he had a real passion for being alone in everyday life. Um, and he would have likely needed to, um, what's the word? He needed to have a lot of alone time in his kind of schedule. His routine required him to have a lot of alone time. The moon in Aries is very emotionally independent, and Trine Uranus is going to be someone that needs a lot of emotional space. As far as I know, he had kind of like a long commute to work. That to me, I think that for him, that was probably the only alone time he really got during the day, and I think he really kind of relished in the, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours, however long it took him to get to work. That was kind of the highlight of his day. Because you need to remember, like, based on what we know about his chart already, and we compare that to his life, he was married, living in the suburbs, and had 2 kids, and that's a very demanding life. And he's someone that, in my opinion, based on other things in his chart, which I will touch on, he didn't actually want to meet those demands. This was not the life he expected himself to live, and I don't think he got a lot of fulfillment out of the life he was living. Um, and then also, so he had that moon trine Uranus, but he also has Jupiter in Aquarius conjunct his fourth house, and so Uranus is freedom. Jupiter can also be freedom, but it's more like the freedom to think of what you want, um, the freedom of thought, the freedom to believe what you want, and Uranus is kind of just freedom in general and liberation. Uh, Chris kind of felt liberated from his emotions a lot of the time when he was alone. There's a real freedom urge with Chris. Moon trine Uranus and Jupiter in Aquarius conjunct his fourth house. This is someone that needed a lot of time to himself, a lot of time to roam, a lot of time to, again, you look at this chart and it's not giving like a family guy. It's not giving someone that wants to be at home with the kids, with a wife, with the responsibilities, really. So that's interesting. And then, Scorpio rising, he's got his chart ruler, which is Mars in Gemini in the eighth house. And so with Saturn and Scorpio, there's this fear of, emotional intimacy. I think he was more geared towards mental um, merging and mental um, kind of bonding. It wasn't so much he wasn't so much interested in emotions in general. He's lacking water in his chart, and I'll touch on that a bit later. He was more just kind of looking for this kind of this stimulation in his life and with other people. It was less about emotions with him, more about socializing and um, yeah, mental connections and mental bonding. Um, and I think that, again, he had a lot of trouble connecting with people, but when he eventually did connect with people, and we are talking about Gemini, chances are it was more than one. And I'm not saying people with these aspects are gonna have affairs, but he can we can tell he's very affair prone by his chart so far. Um, he was going to be someone that struggled to make these kind of connections, but when he did like meet the right people, he was okay. He, Moon trine Uranus again, going to feel like somewhat of um an outsider, but because it's a trine and not a hard aspect, he's kind of okay with that. He understood that he was different than most people and can make adjustments in his life for that and not be so kind of feel beaten down or victimized by it. He was kind of like, yeah, I'm different. But again, once he meets the right people, um, and Mars again, it's very assertive and the desire, like it's kind of like dual desires, and he can change his desires depending on what situation called for. So he could feel very satisfied at home with the kids 1 minute and then immediately be desiring to go out and do something with his mistress. And, you know, there's a kind of flexibility there regarding his personality, but generally speaking, um, sorry, he was someone that was more freedom orientated, not concerned with emotions, and um, socially orientated, but not in a deep or emotional way. He kind of just wanted to be with people that felt right for him and that understood him, but that was not going to happen super often because of his, kind of personality and the environment that he was in. But when he did find those people, he was kind of okay. I'm not saying he was a good guy or anything like that, but he was okay as a person. Um, and then, so he also has his chart ruler sextiling the ruler of his seventh house. And I always say that Mars Venus aspects, regardless if they're hard or soft, but the soft aspects they're going to be more favorable in relationships just because this is someone that is quite good at relating. He was someone that could get along with men and women and someone that's very kind of like they're very marriageable if you have the ruler of your first house, which is Mars, and the ruler of his seventh in aspect. These are very relationship orientated people, and they're very marriageable. Because if they have a transit, for example, aspecting one of these planets, it's also aspecting the other one. So there's a kind of cohesion in the personal life and the sexual life and the romantic urge. Like it's all kind of happening at the same time. There's not a lot of manipulation or kind of societal expectations surrounding if someone with these kind of aspects gets married. It's a very kind of genuine to them. They get married because they want to get married. These are the type of people that do that kind of thing. But he was good in like social relating and stuff. Could be charming when he wanted to be. Um, he also had his chart ruler trining Jupiter. So again, like he's someone that Mars Jupiter in soft aspect. This is someone that has a very kind of buoyant and good attitude about things and can do things well. Like this is not and sorry. He also has Mars opposite Uranus. So there was a real kind of like magnetism about him because the opposition is relationship aspect. It's someone that kind of I think I should move on to the okay, I've never heard astrologers talking about this planetary pattern, and I had to do my own research about it because I saw it in his chart and I was like, that looks like a planetary pattern, but I don't know it. Um, I'm just drawing this a bit neater. It's called a cradle, apparently, and it's when you have an opposition, three sextiles, and two trines. So he's got Uranus trining Venus, and then Mars trining Jupiter. And so when you think of the word cradle, you think of a baby. And okay, backing up again, Mars sextile Venus relationship orientated. We can tell he's relationship orientated with the sun in the seventh house. Yeah, again, even just being ruled by Mars or Venus, chances are you're going to be relationship orientated anyways. Issues with emotionally bonding with people, Saturn in the first house in Scorpio, opposite his sun. So he felt like there was a lot of tension about what he was supposed to be doing in this life. Okay. Saturn trine Uranus. I just talked about this aspect in my Gypsy Rose video. You know, just because it's a trine doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. And again, it can be good in certain cultures or communities and whatnot. In the culture that we live in, like Western culture, standard Western culture, this is not a very helpful aspect just because this makes someone very prone to um, kind of self-centeredness, especially in relating. We can see that in Chris, the Venus trining Uranus and especially Venus in Aries, very impulsive. Venus is in its fall here. It's not doing Venus things very well. He was loving impulsively, trining um, Uranus, loving quickly as well, impulsively and quickly. And also, there's a total disregard for um, his wife's feelings, for example. He just went out and had an affair. As far as I know, Shanann was working as well, like she was working away a lot, and he was just bringing this woman over to the house. Like didn't consider his wife particularly at all. You can also tell that he was more attracted to women that were bohemian in some way, unconventional in some way. He would have been more attracted to women that were maybe a bit more dominant with Venus in Aries, but I don't think dominance is the right word. It's more so a very free-spirited type of woman. And again, when you think of Shanann or any woman, any wife really, with kids, you can't be that. You can't, even if you have that in your chart, you have other responsibilities to take care of. You can't be that type of person. So he would have seen Shanann like some kind of like hindrance or something. And then he was like, here he was dreaming about this, free-spirited woman and living out these fantasies that he had of open love and free love and, indulging himself, especially with Venus sextile Jupiter as well. This is a real kind of like indulgent aspect of doing anything that feels good to you. Um, and then, the Venus opposite Uranus as well. This is someone that is like totally risk prone, disregards any kind of precaution. This is someone that is hyperactive as well, hyperactive sexuality. If we're talking about, his chart rule in Mars in the eighth house, hyperactive sexuality, um, easily bored, dislikes routine, dislikes restraint, that type of thing. And again, being lowish in water and having Saturn in Scorpio with that, the fear of emotional connection and lacking water in general in his chart. Um, Again, it's someone that's not concerned with deep connections. And if you're married and you have kids and you're not deeply connected to them, of course you're going to kill them. And you're not particularly care about the outcome because this is your life and you want to have freaky sex with your mistress and you don't think you should have to pay, alimony or, whatever his deal was. Like you can tell by just these aspects alone that I'm talking about in this chart, he was living a life that he wasn't satisfied with. And plenty of people are like that. Like living a life he wasn't satisfied with, but then being so kind of self-conceited that he was willing to kill four people for what? And he thought he would get away with it as well. I think that has more to do with the transits than anything going on in his chart. So that's kind of all I wanted to say about his personality. And I hope that you can, kind of get a clearer picture of Chris from this. Sorry, that was my kid trying to break in. So yeah, I wanted to touch on eclipses actually because he had major eclipses going on around the time that this happened. So on the 7th of okay, sorry. Um, so he murdered his family on, I think it was the 13th of August, 2018. Either way, it was mid-August when all of this kind of happened. And eclipses can be active for 6 months before and 6 months after. And if they're kind of echoing each other, this is just like an ongoing, cycle of triggers that are happening regarding the same kind of topics. And I'll explain that in a bit more time. Sorry. Um, okay. On the 7th of August, 2017, he had a lunar eclipse conjunct his fourth house cusp and his Jupiter. And remember when I was talking about his moon trine Uranus? Again, this is this like freedom urge that he had and not wanting to be tied down and thinking bigger and thinking bigger about his life, thinking how he can, um, achieve more freedom in his domestic sphere. This is someone that is not comfortable at home. This is someone that wants to be out in the world. And again, even just having even just having moon in Aries, someone that doesn't spend a lot of time at home. There's someone that, my husband, for example, he has moon in Aries, and my toddler has his um, moon trining his Mars. So my husband and my kid, they're both moon Mars people. And every time I like spend time with them, I'm always kind of forced out of the house. We're never kind of at home eating lunch, eating dinner. It's always like, grabbing food from the house and going, or grabbing something to eat when we're out. And it's very kind of like active home life. I don't have any connection between Mars and Moon in my chart. I'm a Moon Venus person. So I like to be at home. I like to just, just spend time at home. I hate rushing around. Um, that's why I might come off as like kind of a bit uptight in my videos, because I feel like very rushed doing these videos because I have kids to take care of, and you know whatever. Um, but yeah, so there was something going on with this configuration in Chris's chart. An eclipse essentially, it can act like a transit in the sense that it brings tangible results of something into formation. It's not eclipses aren't an internal thing. These eclipses trigger events to happen in our lives. So we had a lunar eclipse in August of 2017, kind of triggering this freedom urge that he had. Okay. And then on the 31st of January 2018, he had a lunar eclipse conjunct his MC. So he had another eclipse about 6 months later, conjunct his MC, which would have been opposite. It's Jupiter. So this is saying the same thing as the last eclipse. It's essentially just saying, I need freedom, you know? Oh, and with Jupiter ruling his fifth house, I need freedom in love. I need freedom in romance. Also, Venus in the fifth house, again, with its sextiling Mars and everything like that, very concerned with sex and love and romance. Not the emotional kind, the physical kind, because we're talking about fire signs, the impulsive kind. Um, And then a few days before, or whenever, in mid-August, he had another solar eclipse. So the other ones were lunar eclipse, sorry. Then he had a solar eclipse doing the exact same thing, conjunct his MC, opposite Jupiter, this freedom urge thing again, manifesting. That's three in the span of a year that he had kind of activating that freedom urge. And then he was also experiencing, he had his progressed Venus conjunct his natal seventh house cusp, which is a huge kind of like marriage signifier relationship um relationship progression to have. Venus in anyone's chart is going to relate back to romance and relating, but especially when Venus rules his seventh house and his progressed Venus conjuncts the seventh house, it makes sense that he was having an affair around this time. And like even just based on other progressions, it's actually really quite sad. He could have just separated from his wife, and I don't think there actually would have been that much. It's hard to say because we don't have her birth time to kind of fact check these, but like I don't think she actually would have made his life a living hell. I think he could have easily separated and moved on with his life, and I think this was so like um totally unnecessary. Obviously unnecessary, but even just in the sense of like what I'm seeing on paper, I'm not seeing much stress regarding like legal battles or stress regarding his wife. It's all quite okay. It's all quite good. Um, so yeah, this was so unnecessary. He really didn't need to do this. But then, he was experiencing his progressed moon is progressed into Cancer. And so remember how I said like he didn't really have much water in his chart? When you have your progressed moon in an element that you're not super comfortable with, you can feel a bit lost because suddenly your emotional nature, your internal emotional nature and personality, um, it doesn't really mesh with your chart. Again, he's a moon in Aries individual with a trine in Uranus, needs his free time, needs his space, and then suddenly there's this change in his personality where he feels like I need to be coddled and I need to be needed and I need someone to need me, which is it's a real kind of like codependent progression to kind of have, especially with someone with his chart. It doesn't make a lot of sense regarding his personality. And then here he was all of a sudden being very romantic and wanting to kind of settle down. As far as I could tell, he probably wanted to marry the woman he was having an affair with. But when his progressed moon did progress into Cancer, it made an opposition to uh, his natal Neptune. And so this essentially means, again, an opposition, something to do with relationships. He felt very kind of bewildered and confused regarding his like new emotional nature. I don't want to say he was like emotionally manipulated into feeling this way, but he probably felt with this very suspicious placement of Saturn, he felt like he might have been getting emotionally manipulated by his mistress as to why he was suddenly feeling so needy. Um, he was also experiencing transiting Neptune, which would have been in his fourth house, squaring his Mars, so his chart ruler. And with it being his chart ruler, it's also squaring his relationship axis, which has to do with his marriage, um, his personality and his marriage and identity formation and everything like that. This is an aspect of dissatisfaction. I'm just getting over mine. I think I had 5 hits of it, and it goes back to like 2022, 2023. Yeah, I felt dissatisfied. Chris would have felt dissatisfied, impotent in a certain way. You don't feel like yourself, especially being ruled by Mars. You're kind of ready to go at all times, and you're excited about life, and yet all of a sudden you feel kind of burdened and bogged down in life, low energy. uh Also in one of my books it says going where the grass seems greener. I think this might just have a lot to do with I don't want to say dissociation, but it's something like dissociation. It's this daydreamy kind of energy, but it's not so much mental as it is physical. It's like you physically feel like you need to escape, um, and just general kind of like a loss of focus and it's kind of like putting sandpaper in, or not sandpaper, putting sand or dust in like a in the way you're meant to put gas in a car. It's like imagine a car trying to run on sand. That's what it kind of feels like to go under um, a Neptune Mars transit. And then regarding his solar arcs, he was also experiencing Moon equals Saturn, and again Moon equals Saturn for someone like me with Moon square Saturn natally. I would feel more melancholic than I usually do, but it's generally just another day in my life. For someone like Chris, Moon in Aries, Trine Uranus, this would have felt like a major kind of emotional hunger. And again, the progressive moon was also in Cancer, emotionally needy yet emotionally starved at the same time, lonely, lack of freedom as well, because Saturn rules restrictions. Moon, Uranus is a lack of restriction, hates any kind of emotional restraint. Now all of a sudden he feels like he is emotionally restrained, and I wonder if this might actually have to do with the mistress, if he kind of fell in love for her harder than he expected to, and he was suddenly like, these barriers were suddenly not working anymore. And he felt kind of overwhelmed by his emotions because, again, if you have a lack of water in your chart, you can kind of you process emotions like a child because you're not used to them and you don't understand them as well as people with a lot of water in the chart. And if I go back to my notes, sorry, um, again, he's lacking water. So he's got Saturn and Pluto. These are the only planets he has in water. The Scorpio ascendant as well. I don't consider this in my analysis just because it's a point. It's not a planet. It doesn't bring anything into the chart. It's just an energy point of manifestation. He was kind of he felt like and everyone else felt like he came off so much more intense and passionate than he actually was. He really wasn't that passionate. He was kind of I hate to use this term when it comes to him, he was kind of fun loving, which, you wouldn't really get with the sun in Taurus, especially opposite Saturn. He was more fun loving than anything. And yet he came across as so intense when I don't actually think he was all that intense, if I'm just being honest. And um, he was also experiencing Neptune equals Neptune equals Mercury. So this is out of one of my books directly. It says fantasy and thinking about what to feel. So again, when you kind of look back at the news footage of when he was getting interviewed about what happened with his family and stuff, you can tell he's kind of like, he's just lying. Again, if I look at his chart, I don't. He has this opposition of Mercury to Pluto. I call this the playing stupid aspect. Pretty much everyone I come across with this aspect, they um they purposefully make themselves out to be dumber than they actually are. They're actually incredibly observant and paranoid, if anything, but they're so scared of people getting in their head that they observe more than they talk or react, just because they don't want people, getting in them and getting in their brain and understanding what they think. So, um, I don't think he was a liar. I think he was just a manipulative person in general because he was so suspicious. Um, and I don't want to say his dad like did anything to him, but I think there was a real sore spot regarding something to do with his dad, and that kind of made him the person that he was, to be so um, paranoid and um, you know, emotionally disconnected from people in a certain way. And then, uh, so yeah, he was more manipulative than just a liar than with all the other stuff in his chart with the what was it, the cradle uh aspect pattern. Um, this was kind of he was just more interested in having a good time and not having any kind of restraints or responsibilities in his life, and yet he decided to um get married and stuff. And like no one held a gun up to his head. He didn't have to do this. He chose to do this based on probably the Sun Saturn aspect he had going on. But he has no one to blame but himself for whatever happened. But it's just I like kind of looking at these charts because you can look at Chris Watts, for example, and just say like, oh, he's a terrible person. Yes, he is. Or he did this because he just wanted to have a life with his mistress. And yeah, I think that is the case. But when you kind of look at the chart and you get more of an understanding of their personality and then the transits that were happening at the same time and um how certain transits affect certain people very differently. It's just, I think it's so interesting to look at. And um it's not surprising to me that Chris did something like this just because he needed so much stimulation in his life that this was just kind of um the next step for him. Like it was just kind of this new thing to experience. And he was again just so kind of self-concerned, not concerned about his family or his wife or anything like that, because he never really wanted them in the first place. This was probably just kind of societal expectation that he had of himself, like some societal duty to fulfill. Um, but yeah, this doesn't surprise me at all. And he could have just left them. He could have just abandoned the family. And I think things would have worked out fine for him had he done that and not been, I think he's on death row. I'm actually not sure. But yeah, I'm kind of sick of talking about him. I need to film a video on Jodi Arias and Travis Alexander. I said that in my last video as well, but I'm trying to get it done today. So that was Chris Watts' chart. I'm not giving him any more of my time. So yeah.